One was you had to be active in a campaign about somebody who'd been killed by state forces. And the second one was it had to be an active campaign, not just you talking about it. So it was obvious, for example, like that Bloody Sunday was in there. But interestingly, the Spring Hill families are not in the book because they really only took off properly as a campaign after I'd done the book. So it's a good point to think, like 25 years later, where are we in relation to that unfinished business? And I would say that, you know, it's a swings and roundabouts, to put it mildly. Like, for example, there was some spectacular successes in relation to the Ballymurphy Murphy inquest, in relation to the Spring Hill finally getting their inquest. There have been some ongoing, scurrilous failures, including the failure to have a public inquiry into the killing of Pat Fulton. And then we've had the recent roller coaster about this deplorable Legacy Act, which now seems to be, well, let's say it's going to be transformed, but it remains to be seen exactly in what ways it's going to be different from what was being promised. So there's a lot to talk about, but the only point I'd like to say in terms of hand over to Andre to introduce everybody is that if I was writing volume 2, I think it would still be called Unfinished Business.
Andre Murphy, and I'm the Deputy Director of Relatives for Justice and have the privilege of working with many families who are beside me and also in this room. I want to acknowledge that we have bereaved families here, and also there are many in this room as well. So this isn't your usual Féile event where we discuss matters of the day and this kind of, you know, just the normal kind of way that Féile events go. It's very different, because we bring something very different into the room when we gather together here. And I want to acknowledge that with all of you. And I want to also ask something from you with us as we do this, that we won't judge anyone who's in this room, that we are compassionate and that we'll listen. And you will give your due time to the people who are on this panel who, well, will be sometimes speaking for the very first time, and it isn't easy. So I ask that we all respect each other with all of that, and that we give that some care. I want to tell you a little bit about the format that we're going to do today. So we're going to have a conversation between us about the unfinished business of what they call legacy. And we're going to take our time in doing that and give everyone due respect with that. And then we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about the Legacy Act and what that might mean. And we're really, really privileged. We have Paddy, we've Niall, we've Bill, we've Mark, and yourselves in this room, and we can have a conversation about that as well. And some people will have questions, and that's absolutely fine, but let's keep it respectful, and let's keep it that we're having a conversation together in this room in a way that we're not all going to have the answers, but at least if we identify questions, that is going to be really important. And Bill has done a little bit of this in terms of setting the context of where we are. So in 1998, in this building, Mark and Bill actually chaired a session called Forgotten Victims, where families who had lost loved ones came together, and they talked about the recently signed Good Friday Agreement and how victims and survivors didn't have a pathway through that. And it was powerful, and certainly set the context for how Relatives for Justice does its work even to today. And many of the people who were part of that day are here today, or their relatives, because many have passed away. I think that since then what we've seen are all political negotiations have touched on legacy to a greater or lesser extent. We've seen piecemeal efforts to so-called deal with the past. We've seen a small, tiny number of public inquiries. We've seen the failure in the big, massive one with the Pat Fulton, and I want to acknowledge Martin is here with us at the moment. We have also seen the Historical Inquiries team operating illegally for victims of state violence. We've but delivering some results for some people in terms of some answers. We've also seen the Eames Bradley proposals and the roller coaster we went on with that. We had the high watermark of the Stormont House Agreement, where we all had hope that at last there was going to be something that was legally compliant, that we could engage with dignity. And then we saw the kind of just the pause with all of that. And then in 2020, a British government saying we'll implement it in 100 days, and then within the 100 days, the Legacy Act. and the roller coaster, as Bill has described it, we've been on since that, and the horrendous experiences of families who have had their investigations and their inquests halted in the most inhumane way. So we have been on that, and now we have, since we put this in the Féile brochure, a new Labour government and some kind of talk of change, and some hope that maybe that change might be positive, and we wait to see. So that's our context, and that's why we gather. And as I say, we have lots of questions, but we definitely have our experience. We definitely have what drives us, motivates us, and brings us into this room at the moment. And it's going to be quite personal, and I hope you'll work with us in terms of respecting that. To my left, I have Jonathan McCare, and I have to think very carefully there, left or right, because women do that. Jonathan is with us, and I'm going to share with Jonathan, and I recognise his family up here. I started working with Relatives for Justice in 1999, and one of the people who was constantly mentioned in every discussion was Eleanor McCare, your mum. And you know, when we see pictures of the late Pat Finucane and his work, Eleanor is beside him when he was doing the work on what was called shoot to kill cases. Of course, your daddy was killed in 1982, like where you see in the so-called shoot to kill case. You were 8?
Yeah, I was 8 years old when my daddy was shot. Now, he was 32, so he was still young, you know. It was in November '82, and the police claimed that he had broken through a checkpoint, and subsequently they were shot at and they killed the boys. So he was with his cousin Eugene Toman and his friend Sean Burns, who were both 21. Now, subsequently we learned that, well, from several witnesses at the time, that there was no roadblock, and we learned that a specialist unit of the RUC called the E4A, who were trained by the SAS in firearms, were deployed to the area to engage the lads in the car, and it was just an ambush. There was no roadblock, didn't do anything wrong. It was an ambush, and were sent there to shoot to kill the lads, you know. So.
That became known in the colloquial terms of, even in political campaigning, as shoot to kill cases.
Yeah.
That's your dad.
Yeah.
And your mum then is involved in very significant legal action with Pat Finucane that during that time, and of course she passes away. And if we kind of look, there were investigations. So you had Stalker and Sampson during that time that was so well known.
Yeah, in May '94, John Stalker, he was the chief constable of the Manchester police, was brought in by the DPP to investigate the shortcomings of the investigations into the killings. So he spent 2 years investigating and came upon brick wall after brick wall. And 2 days before he was meant to interview the chief constable, Jack Herman, now he was taken off the case due to apparent association with criminals who it turned out to be one of his friends was a businessman, and he was accused of fraud. And so they took Stalker off the case through this excuse, and after that, like, nothing cases, you know what I mean? It was just an excuse to get rid of Stalker. So they got in the West Yorkshire Chief of Police then, Sampson, to continue the investigation, and he then reported then, I think a year or 2 later, to the DPP, gave both reports in, and that was that. The DPP were meant to be prosecuting or whatever. They were going to do what they were going to do, but the government turned around and said it was not in the public interest to do anything about what they had found. So I always go, well, who's the public then?
Yes.
You know, am I not a member of the public? You know, I just don't understand this. It's the same with these public immunity,
Yeah.
interest, immunity certificates. You know, it's like, these are just things to hide stuff. It's not to do with, like, protecting the public. You know, it's things that the public should know, you know, that kind of way.
Absolutely. And because of all of that, you never had an inquest at all. There's never been a
No.
completed inquest.
No, the inquest has been started and then it's been stopped. It's been started and stopped, I don't know many times. So our inquest is like, it's historical because it's the longest running inquest in the British justice system. So, and it's still not over.
It certainly isn't. And then you go on to make even more legal history, not of something you want to do at all. You're in this position where you're forced to. And when all of us are dealing with legacy and what frames it, we talk about Article 2 and the McCare group of cases, which is about your dad, and how the British government is failing in its obligations to investigate independently and appropriately. But you made legal history. What year was that?
My mother applied to the European Court of Human Rights in 1993, and in 2001 we got the verdict.
And your mummy had passed away.
Mummy passed away in 1996. God rest her, and her sister sitting up there, our Mary there, she fought all the way with her. So we got the ruling in 2001 from the European Court, which said that they've broken these rules on our human rights, basically, you know. So we got this ruling, and that's 23 years later now, we're still sitting and not done nothing about it. When we hold up all the information, hold up everything in the inquest to try and stop it from continuing and like getting to where it's meant to be, finish it, which is all we want, you know.
You were 8.
I was 8 at the time, yeah.
And what does that mean now, if you don't mind me asking?
50 now? I'm 51 and a half.
Child.
Yeah.
And you've spent a lifetime with this, and your mommy and brother have passed away since.
I know, yeah, I've had it my whole life, you know, so it's really, really tough. I'm sure the other ones from all the families can say, like, every time it comes up, you're reliving it every time, you know, and it's hurting you every single time. And it's like, just let us get on with our lives, you know, like, just let the truth come out, you know. It's like, it's just cruel in my opinion, you know, it's really, really cruel. And like, you know, they killed our loved ones and it wasn't our fault, and they're torturing us now, you know. It's not fair and it's not right.
Carmel, I'm going to pass to yourself now, and listening to Jonathan there, you know what it's like to grow up through a life of being denied justice, engaging in legal processes. As part of the Ballymurphy campaign, in some ways you did have an outcome, but it's always caveated, isn't it?
I feel that we were one of the lucky ones that we actually had an inquest into Ballymurphy. But when I think about it now, at the time we just wanted to get British soldiers into a courtroom, and our legal team were excellent. Our whole inquest was completely night and day from what my parents experienced in 1972. It was very person-centred, and we had a great legal team. That was a fantastic legal team we had, who made sure that what we wanted to be asked was asked, and we had input into it for the first time ever. I'll be honest with you, I had no confidence in the British system at all. And when the inquest started, I was very surprised at how we were treated. We were able to give impact statements at the very beginning. For the first time, it was legally documented how my brother, who was 20 years old when he was murdered, our John, how his death had impacted every single one of our family's lives. By this stage, of course, both my parents were deceased, and my eldest sister who had been through the first inquest with my parents was also deceased. But it's very hard to understand, you know, when you're sitting in a courtroom and you're listening to evidence that was maybe you never had before, but it was also it was also kind of a bit of feeling that yes, for the first time since I was 8 years old, that I can honestly say that the system was working for us. So therefore, inquests do work. Inquests should not have been haunted. And the reason why I feel it is after Ballymurphy and our verdict came out, that was, you know, the people in Ballymurphy didn't pose any threat, that they were entirely innocent, the whole 10 people, that the Queen of England on the same day, on the 11th of May 2021, in a Queen's speech, introduced amnesty. The fact was that when David Cameron explained away what happened on Bloody Sunday, he actually stated that it was a few road soldiers. Ballymurphy happened over 3 days, a sustained attack on a civilian population. They couldn't explain it. They couldn't explain it away. So therefore, they saw that the inquests were working, they were delivering truth, and that's why they wanted to have the inquest complete, because they didn't want to expose that this was British policy. This wasn't a few soldiers that went off on did their own thing. This was British policy, what happened in the state, and they had a big part to play in the conflict. They weren't innocent bystanders. They were trying to keep two sides of the community apart. They played a major part in it.
Carol, obviously you have these groundbreaking findings that made headlines around the world from the inquest. It was quite a unique inquest from that point of view, and it felt very much like the community saying something as well as bereaved families about military policies at the time, as well as the killings of your loved ones. But then there's an accountability gap, as you're talking about. What does that feel like in terms of very clearly sort of clear violations happened, and then there's nothing?
Yeah. At the time, you sort of went through the process, and at the time it was like, we actually got an inquest, we got soldiers in court. Michael Jackson was in the courtroom with us, and you know, is that our lot? You know, are we is that it then? You know, they were found, they murdered with impunity, and that was it. I find it sometimes extremely hard to live with. You know, as I keep saying, I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones, and I know there's so many people that haven't had an inquest, and sometimes I feel a bit guilty about that. But the fact is, nobody will ever be held to account for murdering my brother. The state did a real good job of hiding the shooters. So therefore, we know that he was shot in the back, we know that he was murdered, but it is hard to live with, but it's not as hard as it used to be.
Thank you so much. Anna Rogan, your daddy Adrian was killed in O'Toole's bar in 1994. It's only weeks before the ceasefires that would change the landscape that we all lived in. What age were you? 8 as well. Wow. And of course we have seen the journey toward truth and justice that you and the other families have had during that time, and it has been quite unique in terms of being the police ombudsman, fighting for a report, and then everything that came afterwards. Would you mind just sharing with us a little bit of that journey and what's happened since?
I think one of the very first things that probably, and now you keep correct, we did possibly different to a lot of people, we engaged with the police. We engaged with them, we invited them to come and tell us what they knew. Obviously, they didn't tell us what they knew, but we learned things, were about denial, or things that they said that they shouldn't have said. In front of us, so we were able to get information from them, but you know, we would have went anywhere and spoke to anybody. Well, I would have went and spoke to anybody that would have given me any kind of information or give me any sort of sense of what happened and why it was allowed to happen and why these men were allowed to be murdered and the perpetrators were allowed to go about their business still to this day, 30 years later, living 5 miles away from us. You know, I wanted to know why is that allowed to, you know, I was brought up by my mother to uphold the law, and you know, you don't go down the road in a car with your seatbelt on, and you don't drive a car with defective tires, and you know, you respect the rule of law. But why was my daddy not afforded that? Why was he not afforded the right to not be shot in the back and left to die on the floor like a dog? You know, why was that okay? Because it's not okay. It's not okay ever. But that was probably the driving force behind why, like, we just, along with the legal teams and political representatives and Rebels for Justice, we went everywhere and asked questions. And to be fair, we are probably one of the very few families that got answers from the police ombudsman's office. Eventually, it took a while, and getting rid of a couple of them to actually get there, but we did, and you know, it just shows us and other people that if you don't give up and you just keep going at them, that they will. You know, they thought they would come and they would tell us this whole cock and bull story and whitewash with Canadian Al Hutchinson, and like it was plain as the nose on your face that he was just like, here, take that and that'll do you. You are just country folk and you don't know anything about anything the way on you go. Oh, actually, no, this is not good enough.
Yeah.
These were people, this was my daddy, these were 6 things that we had to really come on a Saturday night watching a game of football. You know, it wasn't like they were, I don't know, like it was just normal life and we were just doing it. Like my daddy was there to lift a football ticket for a Gaelic football match the next day. He's a big Gaelic fan and a big Derry fan, and he was there to collect his ticket. It was in his pocket when we got his ticket back in his belongings. You know, like they were there doing normal things. They were normal people, normal family men. Like Barney Green was in his late 80s. He was shot in the back. Like you wouldn't do that with a dog. Like you wouldn't. You know, and for people to think, okay, then to cover that up and to say that, you know, it doesn't matter.
And I think maybe, you know, we knew that there was collusion, and you heard the word collusion being used, but it's often been, like families ended up having it thrown at them that it was Republican propaganda or that you were feeding some sort of narrative. But in your case, you end up with a police ombudsman's report all of those years later saying, yeah, it was collusion.
And it's bittersweet.
Okay.
It is. Like when we got that report in the club, I cried because I was like, you really didn't want it to be true. You know, you don't want that to be the case, but it is. And in a way, you're like, right, okay, we were right. We knew there was collusion, we were right all along. But in another way, you're like, well, how can you treat people like that? How can you allow it? How can the state that we live in allow people to do that? It's not in my mindset to be like that. And I just was like, it was tough for that. It was good. It's like a double-edged sword. It was good and it was bad. It was good and it was, you know, negative and positive. But I think when we got that there was collusion, it gave hope to other people, which is essentially, you know, that's what we want. That's what we need, and everybody needs to just take hope from that. That actually the truth will come out eventually.
And when I can remember that press conference the next day after you got those findings, and the world's press is there, it was packed to the gills in that hotel, and it made all the newses. And there was also a camera crew there who were making a film about your journey towards truth and justice, and you know, Barry McCaffrey and Trevor Burney as part of that. So there were arrests that followed the publication of the police ombudsman's report. Can you tell us just a little bit about what happened next?
Yeah, they went and they arrested the perpetrators. No, we didn't. They arrested the 2 journalists that were making this column for, like, you couldn't write it. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't. And like even yet, I'll say that if you think of the resources that the PSNI, it's not the RBC we're talking about here, it's the PSNI. This is 2000, the late 2000s that we're talking about now. It's not the RBC, it's not historic, it's now. The resources that they have pumped into let's be honest, torturing Barry and Trevor. Like, they're going about their job, they're going about their daily lives, their family, and like, to go and they like, break down their door on a Monday morning and like they trail them out and they take them to the barracks. They do what? We're doing their job. They didn't do that and go and arrest the man who lives 5 miles from me, who shot my eye in the back and left him down up floor.
And what did that feel? I can remember the vigil that night, being down there, as usual, absolutely beautiful in Loughlin Island, and we stood there and we were kind of in a bit of shock. But what was that like for families to see journalists then arrested?
It was another kick in the teeth from the state, because there's not too, like, and it's a lonely place to be, and plenty of people in this room will know it's a lonely place to be when you're trying to fight a big entity like the British government and the police force, and like, and there's Trevor and there's Barry and there's Nat, and they're the 3 people I would say that have without doubt stood up for us. We've been all over the world, we've been to America, we've been to Brussels, we've been everywhere, and they've been there, and they don't need to be, you know, like what they have fighting for us and for families, and they do it for hundreds of families and all solicitors, but like, to arrest them, they're doing their job. You know, it was another like, hold these away, a big flag, and use our, you know, like, we're the thorn in their side, and they're trying whatever way they can to actually silence us. And whether it be arrest Barry or arrest Trevor or listen to their phone records or read their text messages or whatever they're trying to do, like, why? Just tell us the truth. Just tell us what went on. It's a boy, that's it, get it over and done with. Just get it out. You know, if the British government pretend to be the neutral arbiter that they were, that they obtain they are, that they say they are, what have they not died? Why am I behind it? Just tell us what happened. It's not gonna bring my daddy back. It's not gonna change it. It's not going to, like, our loved ones are still gonna be dead. But at least we will get a bit of peace. It just trails this on for generations and generations, and like my brother's children are like Ryan's 20. Ryan's all like, now, so what's happening? I have 2 boys, they're gonna wanna know what went on. You know, and like to think that it's just trailing it out over like years. Just do it, just tell people what happened, because it's not gonna change the fact that our loved ones are dead and they're not coming back.
Thank you so much. And I am going to ask both Paddy and Niall about the big issues that are coming up with all of yourselves at the moment. I'm going to turn to you, Roisin. Your uncle John Moran was killed in 1972 and was definitely before you. Your family has been through the most horrific year in terms of campaigning, first of all, to have Kelly's Bar recognised as something that needs to have its inquest reopened, being part of the reopened inquests, and then the Legacy Act treating you so cruelly. Would you mind just sharing with us what's happened to you this year?
Yes. I'm a bit nervous.
No, don't be.
Sorry. No, I suppose really from the beginning, Kelly's Bar really affected our whole family. It wasn't just my uncle John, it was also my uncle Gerald Clark and my granddad, John Moran Senior. He were all there, they all worked in the bar. My uncle John was working there part-time. He was studying, he was going to university, he was planning to get married, had a baby. So he had a son he never met, ever. And it just happened to be on that day that a car was coming with explosive and left it outside the bar, and basically our whole cases were lying on one person that's a very sober who was watching, and he says that between then apparently they the car went into the bar, 8 to 10 minutes later they come out and the bar went off, and then later on the RDC and the British government says, well, that time frame it has to be a timer, and other people knew the timer was so it was no go, and it was a premature bomb that went off, which obviously we have fought our whole time. It's like 52 years, so we'll have the whole time disputing it. Everyone who was there today, and it wasn't just us. There was Tony Healy lost his leg, was seriously injured. There was Tommy McElroy was shot dead on the day. The shooting started from Spring Martin. So this was all planned from the start. And we later found out only through the inquest. Our inquest did start, it was like 50 years later after that. So
before then, we didn't really have a lot of information. So within the investigation at the time by the REC, didn't really want to do it because the way they viewed us, and whenever I always hear when you're going up, like you hear about things that happened or the way they treat you, well, it could have been like that, but they actually see it by detective this project adequately, and within the phase we got an inquest, it called people like from Turf Lodge and right back Obama, a few people that were put to real disposers who were jumping thieves, and the only reason why they were coming along to this inquest to give statements was because they wanted money, not because they wanted to tell the truth of what actually happened in the day. So it wasn't until we actually found out that through the inquest, and then the inquest doesn't really answer a lot of things because the car that was left there between me and a motorway car, and then they drove off to Spring Martin and shooting the man. So the car bomb is still to this day, you never know where it disappeared to, but nothing, there's no evidence, even though in the photographs of the footage you see all you have is engines left, but the actual car has disappeared apparently. They thought the man when he found it, and it wasn't the right one, it belonged to somebody else, but we found that out later on too, so we still don't know who done it. And then they actually planted the bomb, we still don't know who they are exactly, or where they disappeared to as well, so we still, that's been left open. And then there was a few things we found out that really hurt us as a family, because whenever we were going through the files, it was actually my daddy by accident, same photographs of my Uncle John's autopsy, and we found out that the photographs were actually put on display in our REC museum. So we challenged him along with Paddy, and he went and said to him, like, why was this done? Like, what other reason would you have the person who they're trying to say is like the person who's like an IRA bomber who set off the bomb, why would you have them like that to show everyone? And as this person is like severely wounded and injured, and his body is completely different from like 10 days of the actual bomb till how he died. So we were really hurt by it, and to be honest with me, it was quite disgusting. So I was going, what pleasure of what would you get out of it, having even there to look at it? It just doesn't make sense. So that was very, very hurtful. So it was. And then leading up to sort of during that inquest with Jones and Christine, we had to actually bring that to a halt 2 years ago, because we met one of the expert witnesses, the bomb expert Macaulay, inside his chamber. And then after that, there were Paddy, Fiona, and Ian, and all the coroner's team, and then the representative for the British government based now came together and said this should never happen. So then he asked him to accuse himself, refused to do it. We had to do a traditional do. Still wouldn't go ahead, and then eventually stepped down. And then it was like 2 years we had to wait to find he got raped again. It was in February, March, was it, like that time? I got raped, and then we literally had that day, like from there to the 1st of April, right? We had to basically reopen this whole inquest of what we were finished off, try and get it finished, hopefully try and get a bit of a verdict, maybe continue on. So that's how we were kind of felt that if we were given more time, we'll probably actually have had like a bit of an outcome, but I actually got it finished. And then on the 1st of May at 1 o'clock, we got the phone call saying that I had to come down to court. There's been development, and we were kind of surprised, because the way we left them last day, we thought happy days, maybe we would get something. And we come down, and the coroner says she could no longer carry on with the case because she was waiting on information to come from the Foreign Affairs Office from down south for more information, and says until she got the information that we got to for making a final verdict. And then it was just then after that, we were just absolutely gutted. We were devastated, me, the daddy, the aunts, the cousins were all in, and the whole place was just complete silence, took dead. And then we just broke down crying, because it just felt like once again we were sort of like pushed back. And I think what hurt us the most is because we were that close, and they knew we were that close, and they knew we were actually, we had like a bit of hope. And then we thought, well, God, we'll just stay us here then, hopefully, you know, as they always say, well, hopefully the older ones will die off and no one will come after them, but unfortunately for them, it's like coming after them. Sorry, I'm trying to remember all the important parts, sorry. I hope I haven't left anything out, so.
Please don't apologise.
Yes.
Oh my God, well done, honestly. Roisin, you know, when when the term, and it's a horrible term, transgenerational trauma, bandied around, even does it exist, no one even begins to understand how this is all of the generations of a family and an entire family weren't born then, were you born when the Good Friday Agreement?
No, it's year after.
You know, it really tells us all why it's so important to have this dealt with properly and not in little bits and
No,
pieces.
I think for me, it makes it hard to use because whenever I only ever see my there's always through photographs or like stories my daddy would tell or my aunts and uncles would tell me about him, but I never actually get to talk to him. I never got like we never got to spend birthdays together, and then we always said we were going to school and when we were doing things, like he was the first one of our whole family to go to university, so it was kind of like everything that he's done, we were kind of like following in the steps. And then my wee nephew Conan, his middle name's Conan John Moore, so he's still there, like an important part of us. It's just unfortunately for us, we never got the chance to know him, and that's what makes it hard. So it was. No, thank you very much, thank you.
David, I'm coming to you next, so I am, and your daddy's case has been so much in the public profile now. We really got a sense of what was happening with the Legacy Act, I think, when the coroner said that she couldn't continue with the Sean Brown inquest. You know, and it came to that point. For yourselves as a family, you have also been through the mill where, you know, you would have expected that there would be a fair and access, just as Anna said, access to justice, and you haven't had it. Can you just tell us a little bit, because we've seen so much in the public domain, what's that like for you as a family?
It's horrible, like you go to court, and every day you go to court, and you just leave with less, because you've just left you've left trust in everything, and the courts, you've just left your trust in them, and you just let down everything. It's horrible, like, we've been so many, 40 odd hearings, and just, there's never anything to do with it. It's only whenever we got our inquest, we got it started, and they said we were vanished, she got up in the box, and she had to do a witness statement, and it was hard to see it, but as it progressed and went on, they just, there were so many files that was found by the coroner's that we were never even heard of before, and they were hidden. And then whenever I got into it, there's so much sensitive files.
Yes.
It was, when we got our gist, we were hired Judge Kenny. He gives a gist which indicated that there was 25 suspects and several of them state agents. That's the most information we've ever got. We've got files that everything's redacted. PAI certificates, everything's, it's just, nobody's in Washington talking about it. It's then to be told that we couldn't continue in the inquest, and the only legal mechanism is a public inquiry. So again, we're out trying our best and pushing as much as we can to get a public inquiry, but it's, I don't know.
I'll completely tell you.
I think it's really hard for a family where you're trying to come to terms with a trauma and just get on with life, and you have to become a campaigner for simple facts.
Yeah, it's that's all we are. We're campaigners looking for justice, and the British government have this way of just brushing us under the carpet. We won't go away. We'll keep them back. We'll keep going at them, and we're not stopping until we get what we need to get justice, or not even justice, just accountability and rest.
Absolutely. And the GAA has been fantastic with you.
Yeah, the GAA has been phenomenal. My grandfather was prominent chairman of a prominent club in South Derry. Like, he gave his life to the GAA. The GAA have completely come on board with us and have stood beside us every step of the way. Hands up to the two the last two, Jarlath Burns and the past president, Marion McCarthy, they've both stepped up and they've made the point throughout Ireland. And we just thank everybody from north and south that have stood with us and have given support through it all the way.
Thank you so much. You're obviously very connected with some of the people here more in the room in terms of your work as a legacy advocate. Solicitors are accused of lawfare, right? and seen as being on some sort of agenda. Can you talk just even like without the big politics and without the care group cases and whatever, tell us what it's like to be a human rights solicitor who's engaged in this legacy work over this number of years?
I suppose we're doing it maybe now, we were at school there 25 years. Really looks a lot older.
I don't use that joke. We're going to be in the month of March.
Yes, I'm wearing it well.
So it wasn't very fertile ground for this type of work when I started off in this journey. The Good Friday Agreement, I think you mentioned earlier on, did the rest of the past. We had a decent dispensation agreed. We had constitutional structure agreed, the institutions agreed. They dealt with the controversial issue of prison release. But this wasn't too touchy. We dealt with that at the time. That's been an important case that happened then. But we were left with a vacuum and piecemeal mechanisms. There was no ombudsman's office, at least in its inception. It wasn't designed to deal these type of cases. And the inquests were perfunctory. You've heard from some of the families of the inquests were just hopeless that they had. There proper mechanisms to deal with this. You had to be activist, creative, and as I say, the state weren't passing all of this either. I mean, I would regard them as activists. They used the law as a tool to deny human rights abuses, and Kitson referred to the law as a weapon. So we had to be creative. And I am going to mention the McCurry case because there was a transformation in how we could do our work, and this is vitally important in terms of progress that's been made. And there's a couple of different reasons for that, but I suppose the most important one was the introduction of the Human Rights Act in 1988, but it took effect in 2000. Commencement order was 2000. That changed things dramatically because it meant there had to be a higher standard of investigation. It transformed inquests completely. We also had the jurisprudence from the European Court in the McCurry case that was completely fundamental in that. And you had the McCann case, which is relevant to myself as well, which was very important, the Gibraltar case around the expansion of Article 2. You might have heard of Article 2, the right to life, but that was extended to the investigation beforehand, what happened beforehand, not only deaths, but also the investigation afterwards. That was breaking new ground, and suddenly doors were being opened. And within I worked with Nell in the same office at the time, and we started an historical department, and the Ombudsman had just literally slower alone, thankfully was the first Ombudsman who was trying to be very good on this issue. And we looked at the statutory framework of the Ombudsman's office, and it wasn't designed to deal with the past, but there was a clause which we referred to cases over 1 year old could be looked at if they were grave and exceptional. So it struck me that collusion was definitely grave and exceptional, that we could start to bring these cases. So we started to flood the Ombudsman's office with it. I remember Collusion responded to that, invited us in, and myself and the cabinet went along. As I said, right, you're throwing all these cases at me, and we explained what we were doing strategically and so on, where we started. And she set up an historical director, and she called it to start with these cases. So that became a big one. Who's the outwork of that? It's sort of a folks that we've seen in Northern Ireland and so on. There have been some that have been disappointed, but been some significant findings over the years. But it's been an opening for families. Another big development was obviously the appointment of a local attorney general. I was involved in the negotiations around the transfer of powers of police and justice powers from London to the Assembly, and that meant that a new Attorney General would be appointed in the North for the first time in, I guess, 40 years at that point. And this meant that decisions on the opening of new inquest would be made by a local Attorney General for the first time in decades, and not the British Advocate General as it became known at that time. So I recognised at that point that was an opportunity as well. John Larkin was appointed. I would agree with him on the issues, societal issues, but at that point, I felt that was a possibility that families should look at. And I remember meeting with Paul Murphy families for the first time, and it was one of the hardest meetings I ever had in my life, because I was in the room, and this is also the atmosphere at the time. People had no confidence in all these peace mechanisms weren't working. We had to break ground, and my line was, at that time they were looking for a public inquiry, and they said, "There's no chance that happened. You need to look at an inquest." And it wasn't exactly an attractive proposition at that time, because we hadn't the breakthrough. This was the breakthrough. And I asked them to put their faith in me in that we might get them all over the line, we might have some disappointment, we might get any over the line. And they went with me on that, we got it open. And what eventually happened through that process is, these human rights principles from the convention, the groundbreaking work that was done in European courts, all of this made inquest a much better tool. We got disclosure, we could examine witnesses, we could trace soldiers, and soldiers were now compelled to witnesses. It totally transformed the landscape. And we also started using civil actions as well to get this discovery, as it is referred to as civil actions. So the landscape transformed dramatically, and my job as a lawyer became much easier. It was easier to convince families, because in the early days there was just no faith. I could have got it wrong, and the likelihood was that it was wrong. But just we have a great ground. And another key element, which isn't often talked about, you now have a judiciary who've grown up with the Human Rights Act, who are immersed in it, and who are much more independent, because we had a very political judiciary during the conflict. We made some disgraceful comments, disgraceful decisions. Some of the families can tell you about them, things that I've heard about how they were treated. The family of young Stephen Gaddis, 10-year-old, killed by a baton round in 1975, when he went to court. His father stood up, unrepresented. The military were there with all their lawyers, and he asked the coroner what had happened, and the coroner said, "Your son shouldn't have been out after 9 o'clock. This happened just after 9 p.m. So that's how people from our community were treated. But now, and I think Carmel will tell you, and she sort of referred to it in her remarks, you had a judiciary where families were placed front and centre now, the Balmurphy model and take it with as you get now, the victim impact statements, and even how you're treated in the courtroom. You had a room to the side where we could go and see a space. You were treated with courtesy in the room, and we had somebody see the security staff and everything. We still hadn't got the memo. I think I caught one security guard there, locking the public gallery. And saying, because the soldiers coming in, they would come in the door to the side of the judge at the other end of the court. And I overheard the security guard, this is only putting in, saying, "Lock that door, they'll make trouble." And I said, "Excuse me, who'll make trouble?" And there's 100 Paul Murphy people in that business. Paul Murphy people would never make trouble. Dramatic transformation in how people, families are treated. What tools do you have? Because the truth, I describe it like an exhumation. You have to dig to get the truth. It's never going to come. The state will never give it up. But you need the right tools to do the digging. And from I first started, and now I started 25 years ago, these 3 or 4 things evolved. Some of it down to your own work, but most of that down to families. We kept going back, didn't take no for an answer. Went back to the court, went to Europe if they had to, took every opportunity, got all the sorts of options in place in front of them, because we can't do anything without their instructions. And I don't remember a time when I was told, "Half the case, I've had enough." I've never had that conversation with a client, even on your worst day. And I suppose if I could describe it, most lawyers working in colonial or post-colonial situations usually have small victories and big defeats as lawyers. I think now we've transformed that into some small setbacks, but a lot of big victories. And you've heard about some of them. That's not to say there aren't bad days. There's also been a lot of good days. And that explains exactly how the legacy that came about. That's how it came about. It was no accident. It was a result and response to the successful civil actions, the Balmurphy inquest, the inquest model system finally clicked, it's working, and all the other progress that's been made throughout the courts and the judiciary. You had the balls, if you put it like that, to make the right decisions, and the response was take the lawyers out. Not only the lawyers, take the judges out as well, and that's what we've seen in the legacy.
Where you've talked about the privilege of working with families, and you've been on a long journey with a lot of families. Tell us a tiny bit about what it's like to go into room after room, like what Damon has described there, where you think that you're making that progress and then something absolutely horrific happens. As a lawyer, you know, how does that feel? And if you don't mind touching a little bit on how you feel the Legacy Act is developing now.
Well, you know, I would agree with everything that Paddy has said. I'm sure Paddy will agree with me that it's a privilege of our lives to have the opportunity to represent, you know, the lived experiences that we've all heard today. When you go to university to study, I encourage young lawyers not to go to the big American firms and, you know, switch your brain off and just do mind-numbing, non-consequential work. There is societal change that can be affected through the work that Paddy and myself have the privilege to do. It is difficult. It is stressful. You are confronted very often with a hostile judiciary, most certainly a hostile state representative who are impeccably well resourced, have the benefit of investigators, banks of solicitors, and then when you have an MOD case or an British Army killing, you know, resources is just phenomenal to observe. Very often we're left with our own selves, a very limited support system. We draw greatly upon yourselves at Rochester Justice and the Top Movement Centre with the experience that you have collected over the years. But that's it. It's very much, you know, David versus Goliath. But what we have on our side is right. We're motivated, we draw energy from, like some days there are very negative events, but you draw energy from it and you attempt to analyse a circumstance and navigate a way around it. And the law is a tool. You know, when Paddy says that the state are engaged in lawfare, there are mechanisms that you can confront that, and sometimes the best disinfectant is sunlight. Let's draw it into the court, and draw it into the court of public opinion. With regards to, you know, Damon's case and Emma's case, we were being confronted with severe frustrations and opposition. You know, Logan Island is a working example. Perhaps after McCord was the only working example of how the package of measures can work. So, and again, Jonathan, I'll have to say it out loud. The only reason I met Emma was I was invited down to advise several families in the South Down area as the impact arising from McCarran and others. Had there been no tenacity from your mother, there would not have been so many other cases that were brought before the court. Families draw energy from each other. And the only reason that I had the opportunity to present on the new legal dispensation, you know, when the Human Rights Act came in, it was referred to as the Big Bang. You know, what had gone before was going to change. And by virtue of your mother's case, there was defined a new set of principles that would apply in our courts going forward. So all of the European law with regards to Article 2 became domestically applicable. So there had to be, the state had to initiate the process, it wasn't up to families. It had to be independent. There were new rules on disclosure, compellability of witnesses, and what Paddy had described as perfunctory, irrelevant processes in the 70s and 80s, that were changed, and we knew that there was a new opportunity to address egregious human rights abuses and state killings in a new arena. But it wasn't only through the inquest system. The British government were effectively found to have been a human rights abuser, and the British government liked to go around the world telling other, you know, societies how to live their lives and hold themselves out as a beacon. But internationally, they were condemned in the European Court of Human Rights as a human rights abuser on the most fundamental of human rights, Article 2, the right to life. Article 1 of the Convention is the Articles of the Convention. This is the European Convention of Human Rights. Article 2 is the most fundamental principle that any European citizen benefits from. And Britain was now in the dock with the likes of Russia and Turkey as a human rights obliged to report to Strasbourg on a periodic basis as to what they were doing to discharge that found filling. And it was the British government that proposed inquests as a means to discharge the found filling. It was the British government that proposed the police of the recently incepted Office of the Police Ombudsman and the Historic Directorate, and it was the British government that proposed the Historical Inquiries Team. All of these mechanisms then became mechanisms, it was almost like a new legal architecture that families could engage in. Some families had the locus to make a complaint to the police ombudsman, others didn't. Some families interrogated the opportunities that the HET provided, and a lot of families made applications for fresh inquests. But it was a patchwork, it was a disjointed, difficult, evolving legal architecture to engage with, but it did provide opportunities for access to justice. And it's the tenacity of every single one of you that really drives us on to try and, navigate and explore new opportunities. When we received the police ombudsman report, offensively, an organisation who aren't the police, but are the Retired Police Officers Association, the RPOA, they sought to they engaged in an offer, they sought to judicially review the report. Ridiculously, they were given a very warm hearing in the High Court. I'll never forget Emma's remarks as she walked out of court. It was 23rd of December, and they had had the benefit of the report for less than a year. And Emma said that she was looking forward to the first Christmas where the truth was allowed to breathe, and that day the court had shut its door on. But creatively, facts emerged over that Christmas period, New Year period, and we were able to go back to the court and ask the judge to recuse himself on the basis that he had represented Raymond White, who was the applicant in the judicial review of Emma's report. That was successful, very, very difficult, but it then led to a brand new judge being required to come in and review the case from brand new. That was the same judge that heard the Balmurphy inquest, Lady Justice Keegan, who's now the Lord Chief Justice, and she did the right thing in Lavin Island, and she did the right thing in Balmurphy. There is a new judicial dispensation that just did not exist when there were miscarriages of justice. That was their role. You will convict, you will take the conveyor belt of justice, you will take people from Castlereagh, you will preside over a non-jury trial, and you will impose heavy sentences. So society has changed, the legal landscape has changed. With regards to Féile's case, the disclosure that we received through the inquest system should terrify everybody. But for that sensitive disclosure, which is in 7 files, we would not have known that Swinger Fruiton was under surveillance before Sean's murder stopped for a period of 12 hours and was picked up again at 9 o'clock the next day. That fact was allowed to be disclosed. It terrifies me what they are actually hiding. That it just, I don't want to get too technical, but it's just that the family received states very clearly that state agents were involved in the murder. One sentence, and that's a fact. And that a judge who has read all of the sensitive material unredacted, and this is only one case, and I have no doubt that it's a feature in all of the cases, dozens of cases, that a judge has read it all and said, I cannot allow an inquest to proceed because I will not be allowed to do my job properly. The limited sliver of information is not sufficient to discharge my legal duties in that. And I know that there's other families here who have been confronted with the same limited sliver of justice. That is an obscenity, and it really do. That's right.
I'm waiting to go to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
I don't know what way they were going to treat me.
Yep.
But I know that the last government, DKs I went to court.
Yep.
DKs.
Yep. You won on the High Court, you won on the Court of Appeal. The work that you're doing will assist the Brown family. Will assist. Paddy Council O'Mahara as well. But there is a collective, joined up approach. You know, from a legal community perspective, we all support the liaise and discuss to ensure that, you know, facts that might appear in one of Paddy's cases or Bernard's cases or one of my cases, that we cross-pollinate the information to ensure that every family has the best opportunity of access to justice.
And I think that's so important, and I want to recognise Eugene Paul Thompson's brother as well, who was treated disgustingly in the inquest court as well. So, and thank you for coming and contributing, Eugene. You're absolutely right. And I'm not cutting you short now because there's absolute gold in what you're saying there. I want to just, with the pressure of time, we've kind of referenced Pat Finucane a number of times between us all. And of course there's the outstanding matter of the public inquiry, which is committed to as part of all of those negotiations. And only yesterday there was a statement by Geraldine which was released. Martin, would you mind sharing some of that? This is Pat's brother Martin.
You want me to read the statement?
Is that okay, Martin?
Yeah. See, before I read the statement out, I want to say to everyone in this room, but particularly to all the families that are here and those that are not, that your loss and fight for justice was foremost in our minds when we recently met with the Secretary of State, Hilary Benn. This statement was issued yesterday by Madeleine Finucane Solicitors on behalf of the family of Pat Finucane. Geraldine Finucane, widow of Pat Finucane, issued the following statement this afternoon after the legal representatives of the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland wrote to the Court of Appeal seeking additional time to provide its full response to the Court of Appeal judgment delivered on the 11th of July 2024. The request by the UK Government for further time to consider their position regarding the outstanding inquiry into the murder of my husband is another frustrating delay. My family and I had to tolerate many delays over the course of the last 35 years, and all of them were frustrating. However, this is a serious matter that requires careful deliberation. If the UK Government needs further time to come to a considered decision, then I will not object to a reasonable period being allowed for this to happen. However, my position remains that a statutory public inquiry is the only mechanism capable of exposing the truth behind my husband's murder. My family and I do not accept that processes without statutory powers of compulsion, such as the ICRIR, are capable of achieving the required outcome in this case.
We've about 10 minutes left of time, and what I want to do is just, because that is the perfect opportunity. Now I was about to start, and Geraldine's words there about the ICRIR, maybe for us to sit down and allow Mark and Bill, Paddy and Niall to talk a little bit about the Legacy Act.
I'm conscious of time. I just want to say a few words, and then I want to get back to the lightning. Listen, the Legacy Act has come in, and I know I want to give a bit of hope. The people in this room and people out there, we are victims of our own success. The Legacy Act has only come about because of the collective effort of NGOs, support the families, families taking a lead, and activist lawyers. And these lawyers come from our own community, they're born and bred in our communities, their relatives and friends were killed in the conflict as well. We are all vested in this room and beyond. The NGOs are meeting, the lawyers are meeting, we're acting collectively, and politically, our political representatives are leading in this as well. And we were able to use Irish America, and we were able to use all the stuff that's happening in the courts, horrendous as it is. It's telling its own story that the British state are going to every length to hide every shred of evidence and to stop justice. And we were able to get international support in the US to convince the Irish government to take the international case. That's down to every single thing that we do in this room and outside and beyond it. We are winning this battle, and we have backed the British government to a corner. We have resorted to an amnesty agenda. That's what this is, short and simple. They brought in the ICRIR, and scandalously people jumped on the Tory bandwagon to jump on this issue, thinking for whatever, for ego or other reasons they can fix it. They can't. The ICRIR will not deliver. It's controlled by MI5 through a Secretary of State. The legislation is hard. So the message to the Labour government, repeal means repeal. It doesn't mean tinker around the edges. It doesn't mean that we might look at an inquest or we might give an inquest that's granted. The powers need to be restored to an Attorney General that can deliver inquests when the circumstances demand. A public inquiry must be given in the Brown inquest and the other inquests like Tupper Thompson and Fergal McCuskers that Paddy and Nal have worked on as well with Gemma from CAJ, one of our partners. The truth and accountability issues need to be addressed around Ballymurphy and Loughlin Island. It's not good enough that a state is spying on journalists and lawyers, and we're only scratching the surface. It's not good enough that the British government isn't going to give an inquiry into Pat Finnegan and the wider issue of collusion. We are on the march for this issue, and don't lose sight of it. Hold our positions, hold our nerve, use the courts, use the law, and fight it. We'll get to the place we need to get to. We are in a much better place despite the pessimism that exists around it. I'm optimistic this is a glass half full. The successes we are having and what we're forcing the British government to do is exactly exposing themselves to what they're hiding. So the message to Hilary Benn is, tinkering around the edges isn't good enough. Restore full powers, put the package of measures back in place, re-legislate for Stormont House, and let's get on with the business of doing that. Not Lauren Declan Morgan and a former senior officer in the RUC and the PSNI, who's on record as saying publicly, I will determine which types of investigations people will get. Well, if we're going to rely on that, we're back to square one. So I want to hear just a few bits again from particularly Paddy and Al, strategically going forward, politically campaigning with NGOs and with families. We're not giving up, and tenacity and never giving up is the example out of here today. The examples of the people like the Ellen McCurrs, your own parents, Carmel, that didn't live to see this, all the legacy issues, we are winning this battle. Make no mistake about it, we've a bit to go, hold our nerve, and let's get there. So the NGOs are working collectively, Alan and I and Narati were at a meeting this morning, we're kind of working this out, we're working with political parties and we're working with the Irish government, working with the lawyers and the families. Okay, let's keep the communication going, let's keep the battle going. We're getting there, folks. We are winning. Even though sometimes it mightn't feel like it, we're making huge successes. We have forced the sovereign government into this position, and now there's a new government in London that needs to make its mind up. No room for tinkering. It means the business of getting it done right. I just wanted to give you that message. Thank you.
I'll start with you, Paddy, and then
Just on following on from Mark, obviously we have limited detail from the highway, just certainly clearly want to retain the ICRIR. So a couple of things I think people in this room and lawyers like myself and Mel can do is the Irish government challenge to Europe, really ensure that that's not withdrawn and values until there's complete clarity around this, or we have a process that satisfies it. So there have some NGOs, political reps, maybe even lawyers that attend meetings with the Irish government where they can put any pressure on. Secondly, families have also lodged their own applications to Europe, and some of the families in this room have done that. We need to keep the pressure on and continue those cases as well. There was also a judicial review of domestic courts in relation to the framework that the ICRIR had. It was broader than that on inquests and civil actions. That's at the court of appeal stage. And again, the Secretary of State has withdrawn their grounds of appeal, but that doesn't mean we withdraw our grounds of appeal, because there are some aspects of the original situation review that we were challenged and we weren't happy with, particularly around the ICRR as well. So we as lawyers need to be looking at that and keeping the pressure in the domestic courts and also keep the pressure in the European courts. Don't take the foot off the pedal. There's very little detail. It isn't even clear if all the inquests are back in or where those inquests are at a very late stage. The language in it concerns me a wee bit, and we need to keep the pressure. Don't take anything for granted, not only the ICR, it's the other aspects of it. I think we all in this room have learned not to trust governments, British governments. Other governments haven't to be good over the years as well, so we need to keep the foot on the pedal. And there's still a bit of work to be done in the coming weeks and months. I'm sure we'll all be there. I think there's a protest organised, somebody attending somewhere on the 9th of August, is that right? Am I right about that? Or wrong about that? I thought I received something the other day.
Is there an event in here?
Event in the 9th of August, sorry, event in the 9th of August, just on that particular issue. These have probably followed the protest. So keep the pressure on. There are initiatives we can be all be involved in, and we need to keep the pressure on in Europe, but also in the domestic courts and political reps. Keep pressure in, keep talking to the Irish government, keep talking to this Labour government as well around what they intend to do. It's not clear enough. Certainly there are problems, but it seems what they're proposing certainly isn't moving far enough.
Yeah, no, it's difficult to follow that analysis. It's quite comprehensive, but in terms of where we want to be, in terms of holding Labour's feet to the fire as they move into their amendments, I think the irreducible minimum that we all should ensure is what we had previously. So every single inquest that, never mind was before the court, I'm probably rightly observed that there are concerns around Larry Benn's language with regards to inquests. Every single inquest that was before the court requires to be restored in full, but also the inquests that had been directed by the Attorney General, of which there were a flurry in late 23 and the balance of 24, they all require the opportunity to have their full day in court. And indeed, there will be applications to the Attorney General for fresh inquests, and they also require to be considered, and if directed, allowed to mature to full fruition. It wasn't simply inquests that the Legacy Act dismantled. It was also the Historic Directorate of the Police Ombudsman. If there is to be a reallocation of the work that would have been conducted by that office, that requires to meet all Article 2 thresholds. That means independence and impartiality as fundamental principles. And the ICRIR, as presently constituted, can never meet the Article 2 threshold for independence and impartiality. Not to personalise it, but when you have a Director of Investigations who in his previous career was an Assistant Chief Constable with responsibility for Special Branch, that's not an organisation that families can invest any trust or hope in. A third aspect is civil litigation. I know that no family ever enters into civil litigation for damages purposes, but civil litigation does provide the opportunity to seek discovery, and the discovery that we have received in some civil cases has been far and above that which we would have received in the mirror inquest process. And in one case, the discovery received in a civil procedure will inform and assist an application for an inquest. So there were 77 writs issued on the 17th of May 2023, the day that the legislation was announced. This repeal must allow every single application that was lodged that day to proceed, but also families don't know what they don't know. There may be information that arises in an inquest which touches upon the circumstances of a killing that a family might not have considered. That family receiving the second or third party information has a right to assess and make their own decision, has a right to apply for their own inquest, has a right to make a complaint to whichever body has independence, and if required, has a right to litigate against the state. And Damon and myself met with Hilary Benn when he was Shadow Secretary of State, and I have to say, it was about an hour-long consultation. It was on Zoom. I've never met a politician as well across his brief. He knew exactly what had been said in court that morning. I think in the Thompson case, because it became very, very factually specific around the state policy of the NCND, and either confirmed or denied the president of the former. So he's a politician who's across his brief, and his parting remark to us, which I'm sure he knew he'd be quoted on, his remark was, acts of the past I cannot change, but acts of Parliament I can. And when he goes to change the Legacy Act, it must restore the full opportunities for access to justice that families benefited from prior to the Legacy Act, and it cannot act as an impediment to families seeking access to justice going forward. And that fundamentally means the ICRR in its current constitution has to undergo significant root and branch reform.
See what they don't know me, I'm not okay. They told us everything was disclosed, and then all of a sudden there's 7 beds, and I won't know the gist because of bed 7 wasn't work. And it was just running the clock down till there was no legacies no more. I was the last one in that courthouse, 7 at midnight there.
Absolutely, and you know, your own journey and your money, you know, we think about Margaret as well, every time we think about your ball, and you know, it's so, I think it's absolutely the most important case for us to look at, to see how families can be just treated so badly, and should be at the very front of the queue in terms of remedy and repairing that to what having to use that word.
It's just, anybody deserves it. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just, I mean, everybody deserves to get court doing justice.
That is a perfect way for us to end this. Everybody deserves it. Particular thanks to Damon, Emma, Jonathan, Carmel and Roisin for